What's up, everybody? We're live, and my brother Toby ought to jump on here with us in just a minute if I can get my camera right. Tonight we got a lot of things to talk about. I got my notes ready right here, and so tonight we're going to be talking about something that was mentioned to me by a friend of mine, Coach John Patton from Kennett, Missouri. And Coach Patton had a question about guys practicing hard. That was kind of where this whole thing started, and then it kind of morphed into a whole other discussion between me and my brother Toby, and just different people. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight: is why don't kids go hard in practice? What's a way to get around that when guys are going hard in practice? How do you emphasize that as a coach? And then kind of just the whole phenomenon of AAU basketball, skills trainers, all that stuff that is real prevalent right now in the game today. I was actually home this weekend, and I saw a guy that used to play for me, a guy named Don Franklin. And Don played for me years ago. He was actually a player of mine when I was student teaching at Notre Dame High School. So this has been 20 years ago. And Don was talking about, he saw the same thing. He saw the same thing with just the skills trainers that are out there now. You've got the AAU, it's always been there, but with the internet and everything, it's, guy can get online now and look at a YouTube video, to try to pick up a drill or something like that. And all that is great, but what we're trying to do is keep you away from the stuff that's really a waste of your time and get you pointed towards the stuff that you need to be working on that would be beneficial to your. Toby is jumping in here with us, and so we'll get started if his internet works. We'll see. So what's going on?
Hey, not much. How's it going?
Yeah, nice of you to join us. You're 2 minutes late. I'm gonna need you to run a couple laps. So
that's not happening.
Yeah.
Those days are over.
Okay. Tonight we're going to talk about why don't guys go hard in practice. And I talked to Coach Patton this week, who's down at Kennett. Coach Patton is a good friend of mine, has been for years. And, a lot of these ideas that we get from other people, like, hey, why don't you guys talk about this? And so, Coach Patton, this one's for you, where you asked a question about how do you get guys to go hard in practice, or how can we make it, more important to guys? And we've all played with guys like this, and we've all coached guys like this. They want to flip that switch.
Yep.
Like, it's not that they're a bad guy, or not that they're necessarily lazy, but they're a different player in the game than they are in practice. And, if you've ever coached a really, really great player or got to play with one or whatever, that those guys are not that type of a guy. Everybody has a bad practice.
Yeah. But,
their effort is a lot more consistent with what you see on game night. And I could run through a whole list of guys, that I've coached that were good practice players and also good game players. So, when you and I were talking and kind of setting up what we're going to talk about, how do we tackle this? We kind of started working backwards, and so that's kind of how we'll do the show tonight. Because when you talk about practice, the phenomenon of AAU basketball and skills coaches and all that now is so prevalent in the game. It always has been, but the thing that makes it different now is the internet. A guy can get online. Right. He can look at a drill. He can, and that's a good thing. There's more access to that. I wish that I had that when I was a kid. I wish that there were some things out there like that when I was a kid that I could have looked up some other drills and make me better. But it's hard on kids because there's so much out there, and so much of it's just crap. I mean, so much of it is just junk. And so when you have to sift through all that to find a good drill, something that's actually going to make you better, it doesn't just look cool on a video. That's kind of what we're talking about. So for AAU basketball, and I know we've got a lot of parents that watch this too, the first thing that I want to say is 90% of the guys at these skills workouts or at these AAU tournaments, you're just paying for the best players there. You're paying for the ones that everybody wants to come see. Those top players, they're not paying what you're paying. That's a fact. And if you're okay with that, going and paying your thing. But the point being, 90% of the kids that are paying to be there, they're not there to watch you in the first place. Okay, and I'll give you an example. Go to, say, the summer calendar where you've got all the coaches can be out. You know, the NCAA recruiting windows are such that they really have more time to go recruit in the summer than they do during the season. So when those coaches are all out and they're going to go recruit, you know, they're not coming to see the guys who are going to play JUCO or NAI, you know, those guys in the middle of those rosters on these AAU teams, you know, and the guys who are way up here at the top of the D1, they already got their offers when they were sophomores and juniors, you know. So many of these kids are paying for this. And I'll give you another example. I know a coach who is a skills coach, and he runs some of these groups. And for a fact, he has a select group of kids that he works out basically for free, you know, because it's like cool to say, I work these kids out. This guy's one of my guys. Yeah. And then the rest of the kids, the mass of the kids, they pay for it when really these top-end kids are free, you know. And these top-end kids are also the ones that they steer towards the right AAU programs and things like that. So it goes back to what I just said. 90% of the kids are paying him, so he'll really show up and coach these 10 kids, you know. And that's, you know, to me that's wrong, but I understand it's a business model, and that's what guys are doing. In AAU, it's the same thing is true. You've got the shoe teams out there. The Nikes, the Nike, like the Eagles out of St. Louis. Now Brad Bill's one of the sponsors.
All the big time teams.
Those guys, you know, they're not paying for their gear. They're not paying for tournaments. They're not paying for anything the shoe companies are paying for. Okay, and then so if you're on one of those teams, you're free. That's the ones everybody's going to watch play in the summer anyway. The coaches, the college coaches are going to recruit those guys. If you're not on one of those teams and you're paying for it, there's a guy or two on your team that's not paying for it. And like you and I have coached guys like that, you know, where they're going around trying to get sponsorships to get a handful of kids a scholarship, and then these other 7 or 8, and, you know, like I'll just say it, there's a team in Southeast Missouri, the SEMO Bulls, who when they started, they're going around to get sponsorships and everything. But, you know, I don't think you've got to go do all that to go play at like Crowley's Ridge or whatever. Yeah. You know, like, or like if, say, I know they had a kid that went to Yale. Well, that kid was going to Yale before they ever found him. Like he's going to Yale because really, really smart, first of all. Like you can't get into Yale without being, and I'm not knocking those guys at all. It's great that they're putting time in with kids. And I always try to separate that. I'm not knocking the guys for putting time in with kids. I'm knocking the whole system for brainwashing kids. You have to do this to play college basketball. No, you don't.
Right. No, and it's like you said, the kid that was going to Yale, he would have went there anyways. I think that's the case for almost all the guys that play AAU basketball, not just the lower level ones, but even the top notch, you know, programs like you mentioned, the Eagles. Those guys are going to go somewhere to a good college, whether they're playing AAU or not. And, you know, like I said earlier when we were on the phone that I think kids play AAU mainly for a couple of reasons. You want to go see good competition all summer long and play against some of the best players in the country and see kind of where you're at and make yourself better that way. And you also do it to try to get noticed by schools. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and like I said, you're going to get noticed if you're good enough. We've all seen that happen with Bubba, and we all said that. If you're good enough, you'll get noticed. And I think that especially at some of the big time programs in high school, like the Oak Hills and the Mount Verds and all those, they've already got the top-notch kids. They're basically running AAU teams at their high school. So why do those kids need to go play AAU all summer when they really need to be working on their jump shot or, you know, learning the game a little bit better? Because a lot of those guys, like we talked about, the guys that go to the draft, the first thing they do, they start working on their jumper. They start working on their individual game. They don't go play pickup games all summer long when they're entering the draft. So why don't guys just, you know, take a whole summer and really hone in on their skills and get better at the individual parts of the game that's going to make them a better player and probably go farther than, you know, just spending all summer playing AAU.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a kid locally here who's he's a 1A player playing for one of these big AAU teams locally, and I saw they put up a scouting report on him, like for colleges to read. You know, oh, you know, he's this and this and this, and you know, I've seen the kid play in person 2 or 3 times, and I'm saying to myself, that's not him at all. You know, like
Right.
they can sell you. I used to tell guys this all the time. I can get you looked at as a coach. I guarantee you, I can get you looked at. Like even kids from other schools that might call me and say, "Hey, coach, you know, can you help get my name out there to a few coaches? Can you drop my name to some people?" And I'd say, "Absolutely, I have no problem helping you out." And I would tell all those guys, "I guarantee you, I can get you a look, but then it's up to you to be able to play."
Right.
And that's kind of the whole point. Like these guys can get you looked at, but if you can't play, they can write down on your bio whatever they want to say about you, send out in the mailing packet. They can put together any highlight tape to make you look a certain way. But when people watch you play, if you can't play, you know, you're not going to play at that level.
And eventually it's going to, you know, maybe you get them fooled and you go to a place and they think you're all this stuff on the scouting report. And now you're playing in college and you find out real quick you're not as good as you thought you were. And that kind of sorts itself out over time.
Right.
And, you know, so I think we really need to focus more on just kids working on their game and working on it the right way to where, you know, I think we need to be able to dribble, pass, and shoot better. Like we've always said,
right.
You know, probably the 3 most important things, dribble, pass, and shoot. That's where people keep saying we're falling behind these European countries in those individual skill things right there because of their model and how they do things in other countries. They don't play pickup games and they don't, you know, they don't play real games in some countries till kids are 7th graders.
Right.
So we're kind of getting into a thing where we're putting more of an emphasis on the games themselves, and we're not developing players the same way.
Right. Yeah, and so to kind of put a cap on that, you know, 90% of the kids are funding the whole model for the other 10%. But having said all of that, I get why people do it. I get why coaches do it. I get why skills trainers do it. These guys are trying to help kids. They mean well. I get why the kids do it because, you know, your high school coach can really only coach you November, December, January, February. That's really it. You know, he's got you for 4 months and 20 days in the summer. If you break it down, if your coach is practicing 6 days a week even, I figured it up, you probably got about 110 days a year with your high school coach.
Yeah.
If your skills trainer, your AAU coach, whoever that person is, he's got you for about 200 days a year. If he's, you know, if he's hustling.
Right.
So it's nearly double. And he's got you inside those recruiting windows during the summertime when all the Division I schools can come see you play. So the influence for those people is much greater than it is for the high school coach. And so, like we said at the beginning, kind of circling around the block here and coming back to this with Coach Patton's question about getting guys to go hard. I think part of the problem, and you know, is kids don't see high school, the really good players don't see high school basketball as being as important. Like their high school season, their high school coach, they go to do this in the summer to get looked at.
Yeah.
You know, and the high school season is almost secondary. You know,
right.
So that's one reason, and that's kind of why we started the show talking about that. The other reason, and I think a lot of guys do have that mentality because a lot of your really good players, especially in your area, especially in my area, you've got guys who were like, I'll give you an example. We coached a kid, or you played with a kid named Nick Nemchek. Okay.
Yeah.
Nick Nemchek was at Bell City, ended up being a Division I player at Southeast Missouri State. You know, Nick was the best player in his area from the time he was 4th grade. You know, like from the time Nick started playing all the way through, he's the best player in his area. Okay, very few kids can be that player and want to keep getting better. You know,
right.
And because Nick was better because he was very skilled. A lot of times that kid who's the best player is the best athlete. He's bigger and stronger
at a young age. Yeah.
You know, like I'll give an example of a guy I coached, Daryl Monroe. Okay, Daryl played for me at Crothersville in 8th grade. Daryl's 6 foot tall and probably had a 40-inch vertical. You know, he's just a man among boys. Now, Daryl did get better, and he was a good high school player. Okay, but most kids are really good for that reason. You know, like another guy who was a little younger than you, Stuart Johnson.
Yes.
Stuart was really, really good as a young player. He's just bigger, faster than everybody. Okay, if you're that guy, it's really hard to convince that guy as he's getting older, hey, these other guys are going to catch up to you if you're not going hard in practice, okay? Especially at that junior high level where they're so dominant.
Right.
And so I think the first part of Coach Patton's question is you have to have a really, really strong junior high coach, whoever's your middle school coach, that is going to push those kids and, not just push them, but really convince those kids about practice habits and work habits at that age when you're developing those habits. And it's so hard because those kids are so much better athletes. They're playing against other kids that maybe haven't even hit puberty yet,
Right.
So those bad habits pick up there. And then when they get into high school, a lot of times they continue.
Yeah. They just keep playing the same way that they've got by on playing forever. And we said earlier about when kids get to college, they haven't been working on their game or they don't got a good jumper, eventually that stuff's going to sort itself out if you're not working on your game. And like you said about Nick, average athlete, not a good jumper or runner. He wasn't the strongest kid. He was probably 6'1" his senior year, but he kept working and working and working and getting shots up and doing whatever he could do to make himself a better player. And then he turned out pretty good once it was all said and done. So, and to me, that's just anybody could be. Most of us are like a Nick as far as type of athlete. We're not all, the best athlete in the world or a Daryl Monroe like you mentioned. Most of us are closer to Nick. So if he could turn himself into that type of player, then more and more kids should be able to. And the other thing about Nick was he's just one of the greatest competitors of anybody I've ever been around in anything he's doing. We always joked, Nick's just good at everything. Well, it's because he really worked hard and he just hated losing so much that he was going to find a way to beat you. And I always laugh when there's a kid coming up in high school. We've got one now in the area. If he can shoot a little bit, we always say, oh, that kid's Nick Nemchek, or he's the next Nick. And to me, they're never the next Nick because Nick was a killer. And the kids now are not. The ones that we want to compare to Nick are not the same way. They don't have that killer mindset to the level that Nick did.
And I'll give you a good Nick story, two good Nick stories, talking about work habits and practice. And again, we're using this example of Nick Nemchek. Nick was a great high school player, probably scored about 2,300 career points. Nick was, went and played at Three Rivers. If Nick had not torn his ACL, he's their best player.
Yeah.
They win the national semifinal game, and he tears his ACL in that game. And then the next day, they lost the national championship game in overtime without Nick. So he's the best player on the team. Had he not got hurt, they would have won the national championship.
Yeah.
He goes to SEMO and has, 2 good years at SEMO. So Nick was a great player. When Nick was in 7th grade, he couldn't go left. And we had an overnight camp that we used to have there at Bell City. And I broke it down for you guys. We all sat down that first night of camp, and I told you this is the one thing I want you to work on from now until the start of school. And the thing that I told Nick, I said, Nick, you're a good ball player, you're a good shooter, but you've got to be able to go with both hands.
Yeah.
You're not very good going to your left yet. So everybody went and took a shower, and we're getting ready, and I turn and I hear this ball bouncing, and it's Nick, and he's down in the gym working on his left hand because of what you just said. He's such a competitor that when you told him he wasn't good at something, he didn't wait until the next morning even to work on it. He went right then. Like instead of going and taking a shower like he's supposed to, he went down in the gym and started dribbling with his left hand.
Yeah.
And so that's just the type of competitor he was. But then fast forward to when he was at Three Rivers, I went over one day to watch them practice. And Coach Best told me the story about Nick. He said it didn't matter what they did in practice. Like if they did bench jumps, it's just like conditioning, or whatever drill they're doing, Nick always tried to win. And when he first got there, he was so unathletic compared to the rest of their team, because Nick was a very average athlete in high school.
Yeah.
So when he got to college, he's not even an average athlete yet. He had to work himself into that. And again, he ended up being their best player. But at the time, he's kind of working his way up. And Coach Best said they were always amazed, like there's things Nick couldn't do, but he always tried to win. It didn't matter what he did, he tried to win. And Coach Best said to me, like you developed him into a good worker. And I said, well, I think his dad probably deserves more credit than I do. You know?
Right.
But Nick was a great worker, and he's a great competitor. And so how do you get more guys to be that way? You know, that's the thing is I think in your practice, again, going back to junior high, your junior high coaches are important, but then this carries over into high school. How many things do you do in practice, coaches, that are for winners and losers? How many things do you do in practice that it matters if you win or not? And going back to all the AAU, I think the biggest thing that AAU basketball does that hurts high school basketball is it doesn't matter if you win or lose those games. It does not matter if you win or lose AAU games. Because, I mean, think about it. You might go play a weekend tournament, and you're playing 3 games today and 3 games tomorrow, and if you win, you're in the tournament on Sunday.
Yep.
You know, so if you do that every weekend, you know, it's almost like
you just get conditioned to think a different way.
You know, it's like, well, we're playing 3 games today. If we lose one of them, we're still going to be in this pool right here. You know, and we've got 12 guys on the team, and everybody paid their money. So at some point, you got to let everybody play. You know, and it's not that way in high school. You know, where you're going to play the best 6, 7, 8 guys. This game for a conference championship, or this is a big rivalry.
Or this is the last one of your career.
It trains guys to care less about winning and more about, it's less about we and more about me.
Yeah.
And so as a high school coach, how do you rein that back in? Because you got to think, if one of these guys was playing on AAU teams, he's one of your best players, so you need him. How do you work that out when you have half the time that his AAU coach has? It's really hard. Yeah. And the other thing, just in general with your guys, how do you get your whole group to understand how important it is to compete and to win? And I think that's one of the most important things that we can, you know, teach kids through sports, you know, to become adults. I wrote an article about that last week where I said if we want to teach kids to be good adults, we got to teach them to compete. You know, you're not going to win all the time,
right?
But you should try to win all the time, and there's a difference. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and you know, like when I was playing for you, just about everything was winners and losers. It didn't matter what the drill was. You were either the winner of the drill or you were one of the losers. And, you know, if you lost, you had to run. And then I know we talked to Coach Blankenship from Risco on here, and I asked him that question about what do you do with kids in practice to where, you know, now like they just want to scrimmage. And it's not just kids now. Kids have always just wanted to scrimmage. But they don't care as much about the drills. They want to. They just want to go play. Throw the ball up and play. And how do you keep it fun and keep things going? And he also mentioned about winners and losers in practice and keeping a score on everything. So I think, you know, that's a great point. And if you're not doing that in practice, that's something you definitely want to try to incorporate into your practice planning on, you know, how do you get guys to compete more?
Right. And not just the me against you. There's a me against you, but then there's also a me against me. You know, like, so if we're doing a shooting drill, and I'm usually making, like say we did the 1 minute shooting drill,
right?
And we tried where everybody's consistently making 15 in a minute. That was the target. And then once you got up from that, okay, now can you get to 18? Can you be a 20 in a minute shooter, et cetera? You know, you're competing against yourself. You're competing against the guy next to you. You're competing against the guy across from you. If you can create that competition, everything's got to matter. And I wrote this on my notes. Like, we would do a lot of drills. Like we went through practice planning a couple weeks ago where we talked about practice planning. And I was a big believer in doing a lot of drills in a short amount of time. Like we would do one drill for 4 minutes, one drill for 2 minutes, one drill for 4 minutes. And I'm not going to bore everybody with each drill, but we would go down through this list of drills. And we might only be doing this particular drill for 4 minutes today, like say full court ball handling. Okay, so we're doing this drill for 4 minutes today. And in those 4 minutes, say you can get up 5 or 10 shots, okay?
Yeah.
It's in this drill. You know, you're going hard. You're getting up 5 or 10 game shots. Well, that's only 10 shots today, but we're going to have 80 practices this year. So in the course of the year, that's 800 repetitions. And if you can
just
get
in that one drill.
In that one drill, right. And then the next drill is going to give you another set of reps.
Yep.
And if you don't waste those repetitions, if you look at the way that your body actually improves at anything, not just basketball, but our sister Kendall plays piano. And I've talked about this before. But with Kendall playing the piano, she actually would practice 30 minutes a day, every day, okay? And I think that was more valuable than if she had just practiced for 5 hours on Monday and then took the rest of the week off. You know, I think there's something to be said in that daily repetition. And, you know, it's a fact that your body needs about 25,000 muscle repetitions to create that muscle memory.
Right.
You know, so, you know, that's a whole other topic. But I think if you're getting guys in that habit of buying into every rep counts and then doing that daily.
Yeah. And, you know, to me, like I was telling you earlier, all those reps, and if you're just working on your game on your own and it's not in a practice setting, whenever you're doing that stuff, if what you're really doing is you're making a deposit into your personal skills bank account, if you want to call it that. And whenever you get into a game situation, you're going to have to make a withdrawal. And if you're not going hard in practice or on your own whenever you're working on your game, then you're not making big enough deposits or no deposits at all to where when the game comes, you don't have anything you can withdraw from your account. So, you know, that's going to show whenever you get out in front of other people. And to get the kids to go hard, you know, you might tell them something like that. Or one thing that always made me go hard, other than you would probably kill me and bring me back to life and kill me again if I didn't, was I knew that if I wasn't playing hard every single day, I wasn't going to play in the game. And we kind of had a pecking order of this is, you know, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guy, whatever. And you needed to be in that 7 or 8 to even think about playing in a game. If you were 9, 10, 11, you probably weren't going to get off the bench. So you really worked super hard to stay in that top 7, 8, or get in that top 5, the first group, as we always called it when we scrimmaged. And if you were the number 9 guy or the number 10 guy, and I think this is what really makes it go, is when those guys play really hard, like they're trying to take the number 8 or 7 guy spot. And when you have that, now your number 7 guy's playing even harder, and now your 6th guy and 5th guy. So it kind of snowballs and turns into a bigger deal. And to me, that's what we see less and less of now, just me watching games or coaching, is just the regular kids that turn themselves into good players. One person I always think about was a good friend of mine, Austin Bush, who was not very good at all going into 7th grade. I don't even know if he could dribble a ball or catch a ball yet, but lived right across from the street, right across from the gym, and he was in there all the time. And he was working on his game the right way. Turned himself into our 6th man, got into high school and was a pretty decent player. But, you know, we talked about Nick being an average athlete. Austin was a worse athlete than Nick was. And he was not near skilled, but he turned himself into a guy that could play and could get out there on the court and play. So you've really got, you know, if you're one of those bottom end guys, you're the 8th man, the 9th man on the team, you've still got a chance to be a player. You've got to push yourself, and you've got to make those deposits into your skills account to where you can make the withdrawals one day.
That's a good point. And some of the best coaching advice I ever got when I first started coaching, Ronnie Cookson said to me, David, you got to remember, all these kids don't love it like you do. Mm-hmm. You know, I love basketball like I love a person. You know, like I love my mom. You know, I love basketball. Everybody's not going to love it the way I do. You know, and I think as a coach, that's the first thing you have to remember. Okay.
Yep.
And so, why would the 7th or 8th or 10th guy work as hard as, you know, you need him to work to be good? Because when he grows up and he gets out of school, he's not going to college and playing basketball. That guy's probably, you know, just going to college, or, you know, he's going to the military or something like that. And so Coach Patton says a comment here that's kind of going to piggyback what I'm about to say. He says, when your best player is also your hardest worker, that's when you really have something. And that's so true. But I think it's deeper than that even. I think when your group of people, you have a collective vision as a group.
Yeah.
Okay, like Coach K always talks about, collective care and responsibility. And I think that when your group, as a group, thinks together, like this is what we're trying to go win. And it doesn't have to be a state championship. But if it's important to all of us, what we're doing, that's why, like you mentioned, a guy like Austin Bush or like another guy you play with, Marty Dames.
Yeah.
Marty wasn't a great player, but Marty was a phenomenal high school role player.
Yeah.
I mean, like a Dennis Rodman.
Toughest kid ever.
All-star role player. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? He's an all-star at his role. And I think that goes into, can we get the whole group to buy in together that this is what we're all trying to do,
Yeah.
And that's so hard to do with kids. And like Coach said, if your best player can be your hardest worker, but I think it even goes further than that. I think your best player's got to be your most unselfish guy.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean he's, not your leading scorer or whatever, but if guys look at your best player like he's just in it for him, he's just trying to get his looks, he's just trying to get
Right.
scholarships, he's just trying to get his points, he's just trying to get his name in the paper. I think your best player's got to be unselfish, and I think your best player's got to be your hardest worker, because if he's not, and the coach is always having to go to him for effort, you're having to coach that guy for effort, it's really hard, for your team to be good,
Yeah.
really
The
hard.
other guys aren't going to want to play as hard because they know, hey, he's going to play no matter what. He's our best player, and he's not going hard, so why should I
Yeah.
go hard? But, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's where you just got to preach to those kids. Go hard no matter what. One, that's your job. You don't need to worry about what he's doing. But two, you never know when you might pass him up, or you never know what's going to happen. And it's kind of like I saw a thing a long time ago about a kid sitting on the bench, or a kid that maybe isn't the man on the team and doesn't get a lot of playing time. Are you sitting there while you're not playing? Are you waiting for your moment to come, your time to come, or are you preparing for that moment? Because once it comes, it's too late. You got to go play.
That's right.
And if you're
You gotta
just
be
sitting
ready
around
when you call
waiting,
the name.
yeah, that might be your one
Yeah.
chance.
I'll tell you a good story about a guy who is coaching another sport right now, but who I just admire a lot, and that's Joe Wyatt at Kennett, football coach there at Kennett. The guy is a tremendous football coach, and when he got to Kennett, I heard this story, and I've not talked to Coach Wyatt, so I can't say that this is 100% true, but I bet that this is 100% true. But he more or less told the guys, this is what it takes to play football here. And there were some guys who weren't sure that they wanted to do that, okay?
Yeah.
Because he's a big weight room guy. You got to, and if you're going to be a good football program, I think you have to have a weight room culture where you almost live in the weight room, and so anyway, Coach Wyatt shows up. He says, "This is what we're going to do in the weight room." And there were a couple kids that were kind of like, "Oh, Coach, I don't know if I've got time to do that," because they were working or playing baseball, whatever they were doing. And not that that makes them bad guys. They're not. But Coach Wyatt was just like, "Look, this is what it takes to play here," And I think, again, it goes back to your junior high program. I think you have to have a standard in place. This is what it takes to play here. And not lower that.
Right.
And say, and that's where it goes into, if everybody has to put that time in, and everybody has to, like some coaches say, if you want to play, you have to do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
I said, no, to get a jersey, you have to do this, this. And,
Right.
That's just the price of what it costs to be on the bench with us, in the huddle with us. And if you have that in place already, then, okay, now that's when it leads into we're playing for something together.
Yeah.
This is something we're all working towards. And, I think that when you do that, are you still going to have issues with trying to get guys to go hard? Sure. You always are. But that's where you get into, making things competitive in practice. Everything's got to be for a winner or a loser. Something as simple as this. Every drill has to be finished. I've went and watched practices before where, they're doing something and somebody shoots it and the ball goes up and everybody just kind of stands around like, okay, it's the next people's turn. Like, if we didn't score or the defense didn't get the rebound, the drill's not over.
Right.
Like, the defense has got to come up with the ball or the offense has got to score. No in between.
Yeah.
And but I know that all the things we're talking about, if you're in a little school, that's really hard to do because you're fighting with numbers, like you're fighting with numbers right now.
You might only have 7 kids on the whole team.
Right. And so if you're in a big school, it's easier to set your standards way up here. But if you're in a big school, it's also harder because you're around your kids a lot less. You've got more sports to compete with. Like I just gave the example of Coach Wyatt, he was competing with other sports and things like that. So
Yeah.
You know, those are the things that make it hard.
Yeah.
And I think
And
also
to me,
just,
something else.
Everybody says, kid. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say something else to do
Yeah.
as a coach is when you're in practice or just whenever game, and you see a kid that's probably not one of your better players. It could be any kid, but I think it really helps when it's one of those kids at the end of the bench that you need to kind of buy in, not to make your team win a game, but just to make your practices better and to push the other guys. Highlight something that kid does good. He may not be a good shooter or a good rebounder or, you know, a good ball player at all, but maybe he sets good screens, and just brag on him for setting great screens and make it a huge deal, because that's going to make that kid, one, keep doing what he's doing really good, and two, he might gain a new interest and try to do something else really good. And the other thing, the other kids are going to notice it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, man, he's the best at setting screens on the team. Let me try to be better than him at it, or I might lose my spot or whatever. You know, really kind of find something, because every kid, there's probably one thing they're good at. And you find that thing and just really make it noticed to everybody. It might just be something you notice. Make the whole team realize he's really good at this. And that might get everybody kind of, hey, I want coach to say something good about me. Like, what do I do great? So they're all working harder now.
Yeah, you got to reward what you want to see. You need to emphasize what you want to see as a coach. And also, I was talking to a coach at a 5A school the other day, and they were talking about they have a lot of guys coming back, and they got a lot of guys coming up off their JV. Of course, they're going to have to cut people, you know. And the coach was talking about, you know, just different scenarios they might, you know, happen with if they have to cut this kid or if they have to cut that kid. And he said this to me. He said, you know, you don't always keep the best 12. You know what I mean? You don't always keep the best 12 players. You know, they're in a big school, you know. Sometimes you need to keep the right 12, you know.
Right.
And I would say that's just as important as sometimes it's not the best 5 that you need to play. It's the right 5 that you need to play. And so, you know, I know like in your situation, you don't have a lot of numbers there. And so, you know, you're trying to get guys to buy in a whole different way than, you know, Coach Mack is going to have to get them to buy in at Kennett this year. You know, like, or, you know, Drew Church is at Cape Central this year, whatever. You know, everybody's situation is different. But the bottom line, I think if you can get guys to buy into this is a group vision, is it important to everybody? You know, like, because, again, basketball might not be as important to everybody as it is to me and you.
Right.
But if you can get this goal that we're all chasing down together, whatever that goal is, that's important to everybody. We're all going to buy into that.
Yeah.
And then make every practice, you got to make it competitive, you know. And,
exactly.
There's all kinds of ways you can do that. And I would love to hear some comments from other people about maybe the best way to make practice more competitive. Because, you know, when guys start to compete, you know, like I told that story last week about, you know, kicking guys out of practice on one day, kicking them out on purpose, you know.
Right.
You better believe when I did that, everybody else started to compete, you know. It was like a natural reaction. So, you know, however you get it, once that competition starts to flow, effort is going to follow it.
Right. And one of my players that played for me last year, Keegan, comments on there, the hustle chart. We used the hustle chart in practice last year. And basically, you know, it would have offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, steals, tips, deflections, everything you can think of. That we would keep track of that throughout the course of practice and be like, hey, so-and-so led us in offensive rebounds today, so everybody else has it down and back. He gets to watch you run because he led y'all in offensive rebounding or taking a charge or whatever. And I think that's, you know, not everybody's going to score, but that's just such a small part of the game. It's the most important part, but it's small because there's so many things that go into what happens between shots going through the goal. So you've really got to emphasize those things and get kids to buy into that. And, you know, like I said, maybe a guy can be your best defensive rebounder. Maybe a guy's your best offensive rebounder. Using that hustle chart and tracking it throughout practice kind of shows that. Like, you know, you could say so-and-so's a good rebounder, but until you put a number to it, maybe you're just saying it. So once everybody can see, and now it's like I'm not.
Yeah, I just got a really good.
So-and-so's better. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just got a great comment here from Coach Jason Aycock at East Prairie, talking about make the weight room competitive. And that's a good point. Yeah. Is like we're thinking about practice, but how many things we all do some type of preseason. Everybody does something in the preseason, whether it's lifting, conditioning, running, whatever, open gym. What things are competitive besides just your practice? And that's a great point. Like I know when we would go in, like I know some coaches have like the 1,000-pound club and things like that.
Right.
Like you're trying to compete to get into that. Or like we would have competition Fridays where I would break you guys into weight classes. And like, okay, so this group might be bench pressing this, and this group's bench pressing less. Like Caleb's group was bench pressing the most,
Right.
But they would get up there and burn out. Like we'd have a burnout contest every Friday. We'd put a lot of weight on the bar and see, things like that to compete and see.
And make it fun.
But you always saw there, it's fun. That's exactly right. But the thing that also it did is Caleb might win every Friday. But you know what? That guy that was trying to beat him, he might have done 2 more than he did last week,
Yeah.
We did the same thing when we ran the mile. When we would run the mile, it was a big deal if you could get under 5 minutes. So we, that was something everybody pushed themselves towards. Everybody had to make it under 6 minutes, And so, Jason said here, first hour against second hour, like that. And that's a lot of good stuff right there where you can get, like we used to hang up a shot chart in the morning, same thing. Everybody come in to shoot their free throws in the morning. And then as they're coming to PE, everybody's checking that shot chart to see, hey, who made the most today,
Yeah.
And it's just little things like that. I mean, if you can create a culture of competition in a little school, I think it's a lot easier to do because you see each other more, In a bigger school where you don't see each other as much, it's a little bit harder to do. But I think that's the thing. You've got to create that culture of competition, and I'm going to trademark that. And then I think you need to create, again, that group expectation, like whatever it is that we're working for, if you can get everybody to buy into that, So, I think we've kind of talked ourselves at least to an answer, that maybe some guys can take and run with,
Well, like you're saying, you make it more competitive to where, we're competing, so you got to go hard to compete or you're going to get left behind. So make everything in practice competitive, winners and losers. And then, there's got to be something fun in there that's going to excite just the average regular kids. Your hardest worker or your best player, he's probably going to want to work at it anyways. But you've got to kind of, and by fun, I don't mean you need to put out a bunch of cones and have them jump through hula hoops and dribble a ball between their legs the whole time. Some of those gimmicks you see on YouTube. I mean, make it an actual drill or an actual scrimmage, but find a way to make it more engaging to every kid, not just your good ones. And that's going to make, guys, whenever you're getting noticed or you're getting praised a little bit for something you've done, you're going to want to play a little harder because you like hearing that positive talk. So you're going to, coach just said, I had a great rebound. Let me go get another one. And then all of a sudden, that snowballs and just keeps growing into something bigger and bigger. So where now it's not just you, it's another guy doing it and another guy. And before you know it, and you would always say this too, if there's 2 ways to look at it. One was on a good day where we're all going hard, but one guy's not, it's easy to see. And everybody notices it, not just the coaches, but the players on the court notice, hey, so-and-so or 1 or 2 guys, they're not going as hard as us, and we can tell. And you just annihilate that kid. And you kill him. Even if, me that wasn't one of the best players on the team, if I was going harder than so-and-so this day, then, I'm going to look pretty good. And then there's also those days where nobody's going hard. It's just one of them days where nobody's really feeling it. It's probably the end of January, beginning of February, and it's just a tough day to everybody get in a groove. And you would always say, if one person right now, you look like an old. Sure enough, somebody was start playing harder, and they score, easy layup, get a steal or put back, easy layups, and that gets guys to just really, really go for it a lot more.
Yeah. And, that's a great point. When you've got one guy going hard, he stands out like $1,000,000. If you got one guy not going hard, he stands out. You know, he just looks terrible. The days, it's almost every day in practice is somewhere in between that. And I used to always say, if you got 5 guys out there scrimmaging, if you can just get 3, you can get the majority going hard.
Yeah.
If you got 3 going hard, the other 2 look terrible. And it's like, so now all of a sudden it's like, let's figure out where the problem's at. It's these 2. They're not going hard. So eventually maybe you replace one of them. You change the group up. Hey, get him out, put him in. You know, because he's going hard. But now all of a sudden that one guy in that group who's still not going hard, he better come on or he just looks terrible. You know, and so and I'll kind of wrap it up tonight with a quick story. My favorite Michael Jordan story, and the reason I love Michael Jordan so much, they said that Michael Jordan said this to a reporter one time. They asked him, after winning all these championships, and you know he's the greatest player ever in my opinion, why did he go so hard every night? You know, like they're playing a Tuesday night in February game that, you know, in the standings not going to mean much.
Right.
Michael Jordan said that there's somebody in the bleachers that's never seen me play before again. They'll never be here again. They've never been here before. They'll never be here again. And this person is here to watch me play tonight. They paid their money. They drove 2 hours to be here. I want to give them their Michael Jordan moment. Like, I don't want them to go to their car and say, yeah, you know, he's pretty good, but, you know, he was kind of lazy. Like, I want them to walk out there and say, that's the best player I've ever seen in my life. That was, you know, it was worth it. And I coached a guy one time named Eric Henry. Eric was a great high school player. He was a 3-time All-State player, scored over 2,200 career points. Eric was a great player. Three Rivers, after hearing how good he was for so long, they saw him growing up. They come to watch him play one night. And I know this is a true story. They come to watch Eric play at Bloomfield High School. And Eric didn't have a great game that night. It wasn't that he played bad. It wasn't that he was lazy. It's like you said, that night he just didn't have it.
Couldn't get in a groove.
How to think. He couldn't get in a groove. He couldn't get going. And Eric was that kind of a guy. Every now and then he'd have a game like that. Mm-hmm. They came to see Eric play one time. And based off of that one observation, they ended up not offering Eric a scholarship, which to this day I still think was a mistake. Yeah. But Eric ended up signing with somebody else. You know, he got a different scholarship. But the point being, you never know who's watching. And, guys, when you're in practice every day, that's how you need to approach it. Like, you can't just flip that switch, you know, come game time. Yep. Every day in practice, you need to be going hard. So that when that, you know, like when you need to hit the gas in a game and go, you know, go to 5th gear, like Larry Mosley used to always say, when you need to redline it, you need to put the RPMs in the red. Right. That's when you better have it in the tank. And if you're not going hard every day in practice, I can guarantee you're not going to be.
It's not going to be there. And it's like you said, you can't flip that switch. It's like trying to take money out of your bank account when there's not any there. You haven't been depositing anything.
That's right.
So you're not going to be able to take anything out in the game.
You know, the best competitor I've ever been around in my life, a guy like Dom Johnson or a guy like C.J. Hadley. C.J. Hadley competed every day, every drill. C.J. wanted to beat you every day. Yeah. So when he's going that hard and you're taking plays off in practice, it's like you're getting into the ring here. You're getting into this cage with a different animal than you are, really, basically, is what it comes down to. Like, he's been going hard. You know, his knife is sharpened. He's ready to go. And it's like, now you want to play hard? You're too late. Right. You're too late.
You've missed the chance.
You're too late. And so, and I think, again, if we're trying to teach kids to be good adults, that's one of the most important lessons we can teach kids is to compete. Yeah. We want kids to compete. So good talk tonight.
That's right.
Good talk.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. All right. What's the schedule look like this week?
Hay-Tie, and we got Hay-Tie this week, and then Campbell, who gave us our first loss of the year. So we're going to try to get one back on them. Okay. Well, good luck, and JWT. And if you guys haven't checked out the website, check out the website. It's updated. It's updated, so we got some new stuff. Check out the website, the Facebook, the Instagram, the Twitter, the iTunes, iHeartRadio. Right. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Toby's wife keeps the Instagram going. Yeah. She's our Instagram manager, so check it out.
Yeah, pretty good.
All right,
stuff.
Toby. All right. We'll do it again. JWT.